Welcome to another episode of Just Some More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justmorefix.com or on Twitter at justformorefix. If you like us, you can support us at Patreon, and you can give us a rating and review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to do an inspiration deep dive on Lovecraft Country. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix. Episode of Just More Fix. So today we're going to talk about Lovecraft Country. So we sort of picked up this series and started binging it really a couple, 3 weeks ago, maybe something like that.
I don't know, I would call it like binging.
Yeah, I wish we were binging it a little faster.
One episode a night, or one episode every 3 nights or so.
So either way.
The married coordinating time couple version of a binge watch.
Right. So Lovecraft Country is a series that's on HBO right now. Just came out this year, and as of right now there's only one season, and there are 10 episodes, and we are on episode 8. So we're going to keep the first part of this spoiler free, kind of talk about it a little bit, and then once we get a little deeper in, we'll let you guys know. That way, if you're going to watch it or haven't watched it yet, or you're in the middle of it, that way we won't spoil anything for you. So we'll give you a pretty good, as good as we can warning. That way we don't ruin anything for you. So how would you describe this series?
It's tricky. So Lovecraftian.
Right.
Yeah. It's tricky because the episodes are sort of flavored differently from episode to episode.
Yeah.
What I really liked about it, I really liked that about it for a couple of reasons. First of all, because the short stories from Lovecraft are so vastly different anyway, so it sort of fits in with that, right?
Right.
And then, also, they sort of talk in the beginning about how much the main character enjoys, like, Pulp Fiction books.
Right.
And the individual stories, to me, are reminiscent of that. So it's almost like he's becoming the main character in these different Pulp Fiction stories that he previously enjoyed.
That's very true. So the story focuses on a character named Atticus, and he's coming home because his father went missing, is how the first episode starts.
A very Cthulhu sort of hook.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very mythos.
And so, just like any series, you get introduced to more characters as the show goes along, but the central character of it is Atticus. And the guy that plays him, I've got him up here now. I don't think I've seen him in anything else. It's Jonathan Majors is his name, and I like him. He seems to do a pretty good job. I like him and his character and the way he portrays everything is really good. So
now, the lady that plays Letty, I know I have seen in other things before, but I haven't been able to pinpoint what else I've noticed her from, and I haven't looked it up.
It's Journey Smollett is her name, so I'm not sure.
And her name, I remember seeing it in the credits, and I was like, ooh, that's familiar to me.
So, it also has Michael K. Williams, which is from The Wire, and Hap and Leonard. And
I love him.
I haven't seen anything that he's been in that I didn't really like, so I really, really like everything that he's been in. And then there's a whole string of other characters in it, but those are the 3 that stand out, that jump out right to me right at the beginning. So, so I guess, do you think of it as being particularly Lovecraftian, or how do you see, how do you see their portrayal of the mythos? Do you know what I'm saying?
I think, I do see it as being Lovecraftian. And I think when we play our Trail of Cthulhu games and our Call of Cthulhu games and I don't know, all of that, right? We tend to lean more towards like the Robert W. Chambers stuff.
Right.
And I think this is very much Lovecraft.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Because it has that different feel, you know what I mean? Like they don't have the same feel to me at all.
No. Well, I think it's one because of what the bad guys are. Like in the Chambers stories, it's not so much about magic and that kind of stuff. It's like ideas as a virus, right? When you're thinking the Yellow King, which is, while it has elements of cosmic horror to it, it doesn't strike me the same way that like Mountains of Madness or that kind of stuff, the more Lovecraftian stuff. So I agree that it is very much more in the flavor of the Lovecraft stuff. Although
Lovecraft to me seems like his stuff is weirder
I can see that's also later, but yeah. Mm-hmm. So because like Chambers writes the Yellow King in the late 1800s, I think like 1890 or something like that, somewhere in that range, and so it's really, really early, really, you know what I'm saying? And then sort of that weird fiction, weird fantasy, weird tales kind of thing that kind of comes out of that whole Lovecraft group kind of develops it. And I think they just have a broader spectrum of stories and settings to use that maybe Chambers didn't have. So I very much agree with you. So I know we kind of mentioned before initially the first 2 episodes are very much in the regular Lovecraft vein. So there's not really any spoilers here. I'm not going to, break anything out, but like the first 2 were exactly what I expected them to be in that very much Lovecraft vein, right? Then third episode, 4th episode, 5th episode, they start to shift gears a little bit, still staying in the same tone with the Lovecraftian stuff, but it's just exactly like you said with the short stories and being more, I don't know if pulpy is quite right, but I don't even know what other word I would use.
Well, in sort of the nature of kind of like your serial sci-fi shows, right? So think of like Doctor Who. When you watch Doctor Who, there is an overarching plot and an overarching bad guy, but there's also each episode is its own unique thing, story. And it's kind of neatly wrapped up by the end, and this is similar to that. So it's like a 1 hour long episode, and you get a whole story on top of, the kind of the plot that follows through.
Right.
And it feels longer for that reason. And not like in a bad way, but it feels like I've watched a movie every single night.
Well, that's something we noted, like I think at the end of episode 6 or 7, it was like we've realized, or no, I think it was episode 4, it was sort of like, what, there is so much that has happened, and they have crammed so much plot, but it doesn't feel crammed in there. It just, it's
not like it's too much.
Yeah. And it, like, the pacing is good. It's all put together really well, but it just seems like there is so much happening in each of the episodes. So
it is very gory.
Yeah.
I will say that. There's a lot of gore. Which, again, I think is pretty Lovecraft appropriate. Like, you can't have fantastical, terrible beasts and not have gore.
Yeah, and gore. No, I agree. And I feel like when it happens, it comes on strong. You know what I'm saying? And when it's not happening, it's just sort of, like a regular 1940s, kind of 1950s kind of a deal, right? So trying to think, without giving anything else away too big, what do you think of their portrayal of magic in it so far? Do you like it, or?
I like it, and again, it's very much that mythos feel. It's ritual magic, right? More than it is anything. I mean, there's some like casting and this and that, but it's for the most part ritual, right? And you see these kind of cult groups, and there are some other instances of magic that don't involve the cult,
right?
But most of it has to do with, with cults and
like ceremonial
power
magic and
exactly. Ceremonial magic. That's probably the best way to
I agree. I think that they do a pretty good job. Also, one of the main groups that's in it, one of the main cults is the Order of the Eternal Dawn. Is that what it is? Or the...
I don't know, because I just keep thinking about the
Golden Dawn.
Yeah,
it's a play on words for the Golden Dawn. So, like, in my mind, when I'm watching it, it's just the Golden
Dawn. Is it the Order?
I can't remember now, but yeah.
All I can think of is Sons of Adam, because they refer to the people that practice it as the Sons of Adam.
So I guess in terms of the mythology of the world, I really like that they're drawing on actual historical groups for that kind of stuff, and there's some biblical influence and that kind of stuff, and it's developing its own mythology, I think, but sort of that's consistent inside the world, but drawing on things and tropes and stories that a lot of people will know. But also, I really enjoyed the fact that they didn't beat the Golden Dawn thing to death, just sort of dropped it in there, and it was like, oh, because I like those Easter eggy kind of things where you get to see something like, oh, that's really cool, because you kind of know what it is, but they don't sort of smack you over the head with it, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I like where I can see, at least I think I can see, maybe it's all coincidence, but influences from the gaming world in a show.
Yeah.
That, and not in a, like Stranger Things, they're playing D&D kind of way. Yeah. Like the character that is Letty, for example. Like, this track star, physically fit. Like, that reminds me, there's a character in Mansions of Madness that is that character. Yeah. And even, like, when I look at the figurine, I'm like, they kind of look the same.
Right. And I think that she comes from one of the stories as well, if I remember right. I don't know. Some of the Mansions of Madness stuff I get confused on because some of those come from actual stories that were written by Lovecraft and that whole circle of cosmic horror writers. And some of them come out of Chaosium adventures and that kind of stuff. So there's, the problem I have sometimes in my mind, a lot of this stuff all blends together. So I don't know exactly whether it came from a role-playing game first or,
And the other thing, when we sat down and watched the first episode, it's, it's African American. It's set in this neighborhood, and then segregation is alive and healthy.
Yeah, in Chicago. It's set in Chicago. Yep.
So it's a big city. It's a black neighborhood, and there's music and a block party, and it instantly put me in the mindset of Harlem Unbound. Yeah, which I loved about it.
One of my favorite things that happened in the first episode. There's some electric blues that's happening there, right? And because they're in Chicago, I really like that they did. I'm assuming that they did it intentionally because there's all this, like, in terms of, like, the development of blues and where it comes from and different styles, electric blues comes out of Chicago. And I think it would have, they could have very easily just done regular old, like, acoustic, traditional blues or whatever. But the fact that they actually, took the time to have, like, that electric blues style, the powerful, kind of, I don't know how to describe it, it's like a more dirty, sound on the electric guitar. And it was in Chicago. I was like, oh man, like, I was super happy because there's small things like that they do in there in the show to sort of put it in to like ground it in a time and place. Do you know what I'm saying?
And the other general thing I wanted to mention, just talking about, the black culture aspect of it, is that I know there's a lot of pushback against Lovecraft things in general because of racism and, eugenics and all of those terrible things that are also a part of Lovecraft, right?
Right.
So to take characters and actors, that are black and make them the central focus, I thought was really awesome.
Yeah.
Just for the fact of it, for one, but also because I like the idea, like in horror, where we look at how awful regular people are. So you see all these terrifying monsters and these cultists, and they're going through all this struggle, but also on top of that, you have all of this racism and segregation and just hate on a regular level too. And it's sort of like, okay, well, what's really the most monstrous thing that's happening here? Oh, yeah. There are also some stuff about like the Korean War, and I always think it's interesting when you're looking back at history and you're looking at the African Americans who fought for our country. And in a lot of instances, they're fighting for freedom in places when they don't have that freedom themselves here. Yeah. And it touches on that topic.
Yeah. So I got two things. So I don't want to forget. There's a part in the very first episode where the main character Atticus is getting off the bus and he's talking with this other woman, and she asks him, "What book are you reading?" And he's reading John Carpenter of Mars, is what he says, and he kind of gives her a brief rundown. John Carter, yeah. I'm sorry, not John Carpenter. That's a different horror movie. But he's reading John Carter of Mars, and he kind of explains to her, what the deal is with it and the premise of John Carter, and she makes a comment to him about I can't think of the person that wrote John Carter, but how it portrays, it's like, white people power fantasy or whatever. And like you mentioned with Lovecraft and the racism that exists there, but something that Atticus says that I really like that they actually brought it in there to address it is that he says that stories are like people. They have parts you don't like, but you live with it, right? So obviously Lovecraft, not to make excuses for him, but he's a product of his time. All that kind of stuff exists.
I felt like was a direct nod to the stuff around Lovecraft without having to say it specifically. Yeah, like I
agree. Because I don't think anyone is going to dispute it, right? But it doesn't invalidate cosmic horror. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because there's loads of great stories out there, and and you can address it in your games however you want to at your table. But I appreciated the fact that they acknowledged it and said, but that doesn't invalidate an entire genre, right? So Lovecraft, whatever, set them aside. Who cares?
That's why I also kind of liked the fact that as we go through the episodes, like I said, like he's becoming the hero in the type of stories that he was idolizing anyway.
I didn't even realize that until you kind of said that, so I do appreciate that. The second thing that I had, I think I forgot. I don't know. It might come back to me. Whatever, it's gone. But the one thing I will say is that I really like how they have handled and portrayed the mythos creatures. Mm-hmm. Like, they are terrifying. And not like in a...
So have we seen... I mean, we've seen one... And everything else I feel like has been mad. Well, okay. So there's some ghost action happening. So I guess you could count that as a
but also those are creature. Yeah, but those are regular sort of like traditional horror ghosts, I guess you might say. They're well done. They're well done, but
those show up in a lot of
I 100% agree. Stuff. But like the thing is, when it comes to the mythos creatures, we don't really see those portrayed a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So my thing with creatures is I really like the sort of the Hitchcock version of it, where it's like whatever you don't see is way scarier than whatever you do see. Right? It's like the Babadook. Crazy, intense, suspenseful, scary, right? You barely even see the creature. Then the delivery of it at the very end, and I was like, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? You know, like I was kind of like, you know, but so I like how they seem to do a good job of that. Then the reveal eventually has to come, right?
I liked the ending in the Babadook, though.
Yeah, I do. I agree.
I mean, not to get too far off topic, but the idea that once they saw him, that's what took his power makes sense for a boogeyman character.
No, I agree. So, but like, so it's Lovecraft. I don't think it's any big surprise there's Lovecraftian creatures in it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that they have done a really good job of, there's the part where they're sort of like on this chasm, right? Not really giving a whole lot away. And there's like these, what I struck me as like winged creatures, I think, flying around maybe, you know?
When was that? I don't remember.
The last one we just watched. So hang on a minute. All right. So I think probably here's a good place to cut things off. So if you're interested in watching it and you don't want to have any spoilers, we're probably not going to give anything away about the plot in general, but like creatures and that kind of stuff that's happening, maybe just more specifics about the way magic is portrayed, we're going to talk about. And then we're going to get into gameable parts of this that we would take and inspiration we're going to take from that after that. So, so if you want to watch it, maybe stop here and then, you know, skip ahead a ways. I'm not sure where exactly it'll be, but, and we'll kind of get into the gameable part of this. So when, the most recent episode that we would just watch, they're crossing across that board, right? Across that big chasm.
Yeah.
And Lottie has a rope tied to her and the thing's flying by she gets scared.
I didn't see anything, but I remember her saying that.
Yeah, so I didn't know if it was like a Byakhee or something like that, something like non-intelligent, not like Amigo or anything like that, you know, because it was more intelligent, but you barely just saw a winged kind of a, you know, maybe some fluttering wings or whatever. But the Shoggoths are freaking amazing. Like, they were in the episode 2.
They're in episode 1.
Is it episode 1?
Yeah, they're in the very first episode. Okay.
But it's at the very tail end. At the very tail end.
That's a good way to start, you know?
Well, with the creepiness in the woods, you know, and it's kind of a dense forest. You know, like they're in the northeast, so the woods are pretty dense. And then when they break loose and start killing things, holy cow. I was like, wow, these things are powerful. You know, like it's scary. They're powerful. They seem invulnerable, you know? And so super, super impressed and psyched with those. I think they look, I'm glad they're not too like amorphous and blobby like some you see them portrayed sometimes, because I think that's kind of boring.
They're almost like insectoid a little bit. They sort of remind me of caterpillars or like grubs almost.
Really?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, they're long and ovally, and they have kind of like some sort of rings almost to the body.
Yeah, and they have like the four legs. Yeah.
I love how they did the eyes though.
Yeah.
Because they don't seem silly at all. They're just kind of, you know, they're not like
almost like a spider.
Big with like white pubes. Yeah, they're like spider eyes. Yeah. They're like black and shiny.
Yep.
And there's lots of them.
So that part of it I like a lot.
Lots of teeth.
Yes, the creepiness with the little town, the little village outside the big mansion.
I've always kind of enjoyed the village out of time trope. Like, you see that pop up in lots of different...
Yeah. But it's
even outside of horror.
Know, I think to me, I took it as like a nod to the Innsmouth kind of a thing without them being having the Innsmouth look with quotes around that. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying?
The fish people are, if we're being honest, a little silly.
Well, I think yes, but I think there's a really cool and creepy way to address that, because there's some LOTFP adventures. I think it's Shadow over Dunsmouth, or there's an Innsmouth one as well, and like the way it's portrayed in there is really good and creepy. So while I agree that in like that 80s horror kind of way, it can be really hokey and lame.
Yeah.
But I also think done well, it can be really wicked cool.
It's a line, I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
It would be easy
Agreed.
to end up on
Agreed.
the wrong side of it. And
Right.
the thing I also appreciate is, if you dabble in Lovecraft frequently, you've seen Innsmouth done again and again and again and again. So this is kind of a different way to do it without doing
village
it.
at a time. Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. So.
And just, the general feel of Outsiders anyway.
Yeah.
Which is, dialed up even further because they're the only black people in the entire
whole
place.
village,
So it's like outsider on top of outsider.
Yeah, very clear. So, what did you think of the episode in Korea? Did you like that one? Did you find it too jarring? Because now they've kind of brought in some other...
Oh, I guess that would count as a creature, but it's not really Lovecraft specific. It's the Nine-Tails creature.
Right. So, my thing is that I liked it a lot.
Kitsuna?
Kitsumi?
Okay. I'm probably saying it wrong,
but it's the Nine-Tails creature. You're exactly right. So, which made me laugh because I didn't realize that was a nine-tailed fox, which is Ninetales from Pokemon. So I just had a small laugh there. Anyway,
slightly different vibe.
Yeah, a little bit. But I really liked it, and I thought it was cool because it had having the same characters in each of the episodes. When it kind of shifts genre a little bit, shifts gears a little bit, I like it because it grounds the episode in something that you're familiar with, but it is still drastically different. The only time that I found it jarring was the one with, is it Horatia? That's a Greek name. Hippolyta. When she kind of does the, space thing, I was a little jarred by that. Now, I'm not saying it was bad.
It was jarring. It was wildly different than the other episodes, but I actually liked that one better than the Korea episode.
Oh, really?
So, the Korea thing I appreciated for a couple of reasons, but I thought it was kind of a heavy-handed switch in order to accomplish the thing. So, first of all, it kind of establishes that this is a worldwide phenomenon, that there's weird stuff happening. It is not isolated to Chicago. It's not isolated to the U.S. For some reason, there's weird stuff everywhere.
Right.
And it also kind of establishes a history of oddness to the character that is Tick. But I thought that most of the episode sort of was like a heavy-handed way to show that Tick has some fatal flaws.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, he seems very much to be this virtuous hero. And that episode is like, wait a second.
Yeah.
You have some serious baggage and you are by no means perfect. There are lots of sins on your plate.
Right. No, I agree. I agree.
But yeah, I thought it was kind of but historically, from the historical fiction standpoint, it fits. And I think it's interesting to see some of his motivations for going off to war, and it establishes some of his other background and kind of informs it adds to the sadness of how bad the discrimination is as he comes back a war hero, essentially, and is just treated like absolute crap.
Right. Well, there's an interesting conversation that happens between him. There's
a Korean gentleman that's serving with him, and then this girl actually from Korea.
What's her name? What's her character's name?
I'm not thinking of it right
She's only been in one episode, really, so I can't remember it now. But
she's been in 2 now.
Well, yeah. So I'll find it real quick. Is it Gian? It's Ji-AH. Gia, maybe.
I don't remember.
It's like it was erased from our mind. So either way, but I like... I don't know. I found that I really enjoyed that whole episode. I thought it was pretty good. It was a cool shift, and I liked how it gave context to Tick.
Yeah. It was something else interesting that I'm just kind of realizing now that it did is... Before that, so the monster you see before that, I guess we're going to call her a monster, but is the Shoggoth, right? And so you have this essentially beast creature, right? But now you're meeting another supernatural creature that is more sentient and
intelligent.
And summoned. So you follow her, and it's like, well, okay, so she's pretty monstrous, but this other bad stuff happens, and then she brings it up to Tick several times, where she's like, I've murdered these 99 souls, and she's like, well, that's my nature. What was your excuse?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like framing it. It was like, okay, so you're a monster, but are you monstrous? You know?
Yeah. Well, I also like the idea that
it's an interesting argument too, right?
An evolution of her as she chooses not to kill him. Do you know what I'm saying? You know, and then she has that conversation, and so it's you realize, for at least for the creatures that are sentient, is that a choice? Is it not a choice? Is it in their nature? Is it not? You know,
do they have a soul?
Right?
Don't they? Can they change? Are they more than just that nature?
So I think it's created some interesting questions. You know, don't know if they'll dig into them or not, but I do think it creates some interesting problems and potentials for stories and threads to chase down or whatever. So when it comes to the magic and stuff, do you like? So when the Winthrop?
The Winthrop house is the house that they move into.
What's the girl's name?
Braithwaite?
Yeah, Braithwaite. That's it. That's the word. When she casts the invulnerability spell on
Letty.
Terrible with names today, apparently. It's pretty quick. Just a quick incantation and, sort of, some hand motion or whatever. And then, it happens. So I like the idea that there are some things that are cast quickly and then other things that take full-on ritual to do. And I like how when she tells Atticus that when she teaches him to cast a spell, it's also not just the motions and the words, it's also the intention and all this kind of stuff.
And there's a price. Yeah. Right?
Exactly.
And it's pretty steep.
Yeah. Yep. So I like the idea of all that. I like the way that they have sort of made magic to be incredibly powerful, but also it's not just thrown around everywhere. Do you know what I'm saying? So I guess I wouldn't say that it's rare that it happens in the show, but you definitely get the sense that when it happens, it's powerful and it's going to affect the story in a drastic way. So
I like how magic is a currency of power outside of that as well, right? So like the people that possess this are kind of a dynasty. It almost reminds me of Vampire like that. So the people holding the actual power within the world itself are the people that have this magical power too.
It's Christina Braithwaite. Do you think that I like her character a lot because she sort of seems like this mixture of sinister and seductress? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, she's like this strange mashup of Cruella de Vil and I don't even know what else I would like, because she has this car and she's very much like on her own path.
I would hesitate to even call her a seductress. So she is certainly cares about her appearance. She's put together well, but most commonly that's not how she's getting the things that she wants by any means.
Right.
So she is feminine, but she's not necessarily using her femininity as her main tool to accomplish things.
Right. No, I just I don't know what the right word is, because
she to me is like she's an angry woman in a way that is calculating.
Yeah, she's driven. That's the word I'm looking for. She's driven and like motivated and like always forward. Do you know what I mean? Like hard pressing, undeniable. You know what I mean?
Yes, very much
force of nature.
Undeniable is
force of nature is the word I'm looking for there. I like her character a lot. I also like her because there's this inherent thing with her about this grudge against her father, because since she's a girl, she could never be part of the Sons of Adam. So she has this sort of chip on her shoulder and this thing to prove. And something that I like about her is that in all the interactions she's had with several of the different characters, she's very different with the other female characters than she is with the male characters. So with Lottie, she says, I won't put the spell on Tick, but I'll put it on you. Or Letty. I'll put it on you,
okay.
What?
I feel like that's a calculating move too, because I think she wants something from him in a physical, like there may be some sacrifice or something coming up that. So it seems, when she delivers it, she's very conniving, right?
Yeah,
she's wily,
I agree.
and she's a good liar. Like you want to believe her, but it's one of those things where she's not a character that does something without her own motivations and
I agree.
Good reason.
But like the situation with Ruby, so it's very clear to me that she's chosen to do these things partly because they're like strong female characters in the story, right?
And I really love them both, right? Because they are both like angry women about what their situation in life has ended up as. Yes, okay. Ruby and Christine, right? But they are the level of emotion that you see from Ruby, like everything is just like, you know, very, very dramatic with her character, whereas Christine is always like composed and
bottled up.
I appreciate the two different approaches to feminine anger.
Right? But they're also a good foil to one another. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
They are. It's kind of weird to see. You know, like when you think the classic foil is Watson, right? He's the foil to Sherlock Holmes. But in a way, it's a great instance of where they are sort of like a foil to one another. Do you know what I'm saying?
They are sort of similar, like the Sherlock Watson thing, because
in a way,
she is that calculating, cool sort of thing like Sherlock is, and Watson is more. He's just more human, which, you know, Ruby is so much more human.
I agree. So, you mentioned, let me back up a little bit. So, with Christine, something I was trying to get to before that sort of eluded me. I like the idea that she sort of sees herself and people that have magic as sort of beyond human. Which is something that I like, because you kind of like alluded to a little bit with the vampire thing in the Dynasty, but like it's sort of interesting to watch her talk to other characters about how they have these, like Ruby has some concerns about different things that are sort of like mortal affairs with quotes around those kind of a thing, right? And she just sort of like, Christine's just like, why do you care? That stuff doesn't matter. Like, we are on another level of this stuff now. Like, we're not human anymore almost, right? And I like, again, it's a nice contrast between those two characters again, but I really like how they portray it where this is a person who grew up in this sort of circle of people and world with magic and really understands, I am on a different power level than regular normal mortals, I guess you might say, right? And I think they do a really good job of portraying how she's still human and yet alien at the same time. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's a really cool portrayal of it, I guess, because she does sort of seem ethereal in a way. Yeah,
but her humanity is still accessible.
Yeah.
Like, you get the feeling that she's doing things for her own reasons, but she's not beyond... You know, she's not beyond help. Like, she hasn't gone so far that you can't still appeal to some compassion. Like, you feel like it is there, even though it may be kind of deep down. But, you know, her as opposed to the character that is her father. Right?
Yeah, no, I agree. That's sort of taken to the next step, I suppose.
So I said, like, she's a really good actor, but I don't think it's all acting either. Like, it seems like there's some humanity that's intact there, and she does still care to a certain extent.
Well, I think she cares. There's some kind of feelings there between her and Ruby, and then there's, in the last episode we just watched, Ruby talks about, I think it's Bobo gets thrown in the river with barbed wire around him or whatever, and she's like, you don't know what that feels like. So then she goes and has it done to her, and since she's got that immortality spell or whatever, she comes back to life or whatever. So, like, you can tell that she wants... I feel like, in a way, maybe Ruby is a way for her character to connect back to the real world. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's her, like, her way to try and, you know, reconnect and, you know, feel those things or whatever, you know? So... But yeah, I think she is my favorite character in the whole thing so far, because she's just so very...
Oh, Ruby's my favorite.
Oh, yeah? I just like whenever Christine comes, you know, like, on in the scene, I'm just like, what is she doing? She's like, there's never a moment, like you said, she's so calculated and driven and unstoppable that, like, every time she's there, it's like, what are you after? What are you doing? Who are you screwing over? How are you tricking these people? You know, like, it's just all of that stuff. So, right on. All right, so I think we've gushed about the show enough. So, in terms of, like, gameable stuff, what do you think is good to pull from for this?
So, I like the idea of making magic a little bit more accessible for the players in a usable way.
Okay.
So, in the show, like, our main characters, like our protagonists, right? They are starting to dabble in the mythos, so they've gained some occult knowledge, right? But not enough to be able to fully understand everything that they're doing. So, like, for example, like, Tick learns this sort of, like, protection spell, right? And him and his dad cast it. And it works, but we don't find out that it works until later, and it definitely does not work in the way that they intended.
Unintended consequences kind of a thing, yeah.
So I like that. I like the idea of it not always being terrible for players. Like, here's something powerful and accessible that you can have, but it's going to have unintended consequences that you're not aware of at this moment. So I like the idea of that.
I like how the bad guys quotes around that, don't know what the actual protagonists of the story, what their power level is and what they know. Mm-hmm. So like there's these police officers that are also wizards or however you want to say that, and there's a specific scene where they're talking to one another and they don't know what Tick and all of them know. They like what spells they might have or whatever, and there's
some of that is again from them accessing magic that they don't really understand the full breadth of, so they have a person who is like trying to cleanse this house and exorcise this house, and she comes and does all this stuff to rid the evil spirits of the house. Well, as a side benefit, these omens that she's drawn, these symbols that she's drawn onto the walls provide protection from these outside magic people, and so then they're like, oh well, they have protection spells on their house. Right. So what else? What else are they aware of?
Well, I also like the protection spells on the house because it gives them sort of like a safe haven and a base of operations to where, in theory, they're safe there. Right. Right. So I appreciated that. I thought that was a cool, easy thing to steal game wise. The first thing that I noticed about it when in the very first episode was we played in a Harlem Unbound game and had a great time. It was crazy, intense. It was one of the scenarios right out of the book. Right. And I don't know, when we finished playing, I was like, that was awesome and a lot of fun, and I'm glad we did it. But I don't know how I would run this game and make it feel like this is supposed to feel. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Without having run like one of their own scenarios, because I'm not a big fan of, like, I just don't run a lot of pre-made games. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then after watching this, I was like, if you're looking for inspiration for how to do something with Harlem Unbound, I think this is the first, like, just watch every episode, maybe watch them multiple times. And this, I feel like, does a great job of portraying what the time period is like and dealing with all the disaster that time period is, and still being able to have a cohesive story that has that as a backdrop and is still in the very forefront of the story, but isn't only centralized around that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I just, when I saw Harlem Unbound, I was like, this is amazing, but I just don't know how to make this, like, I don't know how to do this. You know what I'm saying? And then after watching this, I was like, oh, this, okay. Like, I'm not saying I could really still do it yet, but I think this, like, grounds it in my mind in a way that makes it easier to be able to do it. Because, like, most stories we're telling and playing, we're sort of, like, mashing up different stories we've heard and seen, and it sort of gives you another place to pull inspiration from to sort of make this work.
Mm-hmm. I think something else that I would pull from this, so we talked about the overarching plot throughout the series and like that mini episode kind of feeling. So a lot of times when we've played Trail of Cthulhu or Call of Cthulhu or whatever, pick your
whatever iteration,
Lovecraft mythos, right? It's been like you don't necessarily see the monsters or encounter the monsters until you've come to the climax of the thing. Right. Or like that is the big thing, right? Whereas here we are seeing some monsters along the way, but they're not necessarily central to the investigation that's happening. So that investigation is a thread that's kind of going all the way through, and we're trying to figure out what's really going on here, what's really happening. And that may lead up to some giant monster we haven't watched the last couple of episodes yet. In fact, I may be a little disappointed if it doesn't. But there are these other things that are treated more as milestones, whereas before they've been more of a climactic final showdown sort of experience.
Part of that, though, is because mechanically both Trail and Call of Cthulhu are pretty
so deadly,
unforgiving. So, like, if you see the Shoggoth and you're supposed to survive...
Well, but in both cases, it's not like the protagonists were the ones that... overcame these beasts. They, they were a problem, and then they weren't for things that were completely out of their hands.
I think I agree with you 100%. I think you have a completely valid point. My only concern with it would be that if you're running that game and you want to do that, you've got to make extra special care that you don't just TPK everybody, and you've got to have those other mechanisms in there.
Just try again next time.
Well, yeah, it's all good. Like, live and learn, right? But you've got to have something in there to make sure that there's an escape route or whatever it is. Like the example in the story in that episode is a perfect way to do it. But that stuff has to be built in there. Otherwise, it's just like, okay, cool, let's try this adventure again. Right. We've already kind of mentioned quite a bit of it already, but I really think in terms of things to take from this series, there are so many strong characters in this show, all of them with their own set of motivations and flaws. All of every character that's in here not say that they're bad, but they all have character flaws to them. They're all, like a little well-rounded, more developed, right, characters. And I think that if you're struggling to find sort of like different archetypes or whatever, specifically with solid, strong female characters, this is a great example of it. There's a lot of just loads of good examples of it,
Well, and we mentioned Hippolyta briefly, and she's kind of a minor character before that episode.
Yeah.
But I appreciated that episode kind of especially because a lot of times the wife female character just gets kind of brushed off, especially when things are set in the 50s.
Yeah.
Right? And this really goes back and looks at her story again, and we see all the things that she could have been, and she's so intelligent. It was reminding me of what's the name of the mathematicians for NASA? There's a book about it. They made it into
a movie. Yeah, I know what you're talking
about. I can see the front of it. It's blue, and it's got them all standing right there.
I have no idea, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so the black women that are doing the coding and stuff for NASA, and actually even before that, they work
all the high-level math and everything.
Yeah, they work doing the math for fighter pilots for the war. Like, that's how they start, is in World War II. Or maybe it's right after World War II for Korea. But it's something to do with planes in the war effort, basically, is how that all starts. But yeah, so it reminded me of that. So you're like, oh my gosh, so her husband is out doing these things. And it kind of alludes to it where she has this kind of desire to go out and have some adventure too. But because of the world they live in, her husband's like, no, this is really dangerous.
Yeah.
But then you see her as this other person, and like she has these other dreams and that aren't focused on family and focused on kids. Like, these are the things that she wanted to do and wanted to be. And you can see really how much she's capable of. Right. That she's holding back in order to have this life, providing for this family. So I thought that was really cool. Also, there is no other episode that's more John Carter of Mars than Hippolyta's episode.
Yeah, so when it first happens, and she goes to this sort of like warp portal thing or whatever, and I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And then it goes hard in the paint on John Carter. And at first I was like, what just happened? And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait a minute. I just got to shift into John Carter of Mars mode. And for about maybe 15 or 30 seconds, I was like, oh my God, what is happening? They're just killing this episode. And then I realized, wait a minute.
Well, it put me in mind of other sci-fi stuff too. So it reminded me actually a lot of the Kurt Vonnegut Slaughterhouse-Five, because there's a whole section of that book where you're like, what is happening? Am I in his head? Am I actually in outer space? Right. Are there really aliens? What in the bejesus is happening here?
So, like, it took me a minute to get into it, I mean, like, maybe, like, literally a whole minute, but still, I guess it was jarring because I didn't expect it. But then once I was like, well, the show's been great so far, I'll just trust the process, and,
Well, and her speech in front of her troops in that section about the power of women's anger and a mother's anger was one of the most inspiring things I've heard in a long time. Right. And it was presented in a very odd place.
Gotta say, I can't, it was killing me. The helmets that they had on were making me crazy because they were bad. But like
aliens, outer space, thought time travel, and it's the helmets that have.
They didn't fit right. They weren't positioned right.
It's not a historical fiction thing.
I know, but like the thing is they've got to be functional because they're wearing them like armor.
They don't, because it's happening in a land of make believe.
it was just for me like one, and it's all good. I can get over it. Do you know what I'm saying? It wasn't like it didn't ruin it for me. But I was just like because my thing is that like. To me, it just aesthetically didn't look good. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I thought, because like it wasn't sized quite right, the way it sat on her head, it's just, and it takes just a little bit of padding. Do you know what I'm saying?
Kind of janky looking.
Like I was like, what? And I thought, when you're gonna shift that hard to something else, I think you gotta, make sure that those little bits that are gonna be on, if it was something that was in the background, whatever. But like, it's the main character of the whole scene and the whole premise of why we're in this moment. Mm-hmm. The helmet on her, like, if it was on the other soldiers that were there with her, okay, whatever. But, like, hers has to be right. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I found that to be a little jarring. But, it's a small piece. Do you know what I'm saying? You know, it wasn't a huge ordeal or whatever. I also thought they did a really good job of sort of like a training montage that was going to take place over a long period of time. It was like years, and I thought they really did a good job of kind of, you know, displaying that or whatever, if that makes sense. So, yeah, it goes. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed that. Once it was all done, I was like, okay, you got me. Not bad. I'm not going to say it's my favorite part of the show, but not bad. So, right on. Anything else game will take? I mean, like, there's so much, really. The whole thing, you could take the entire piece of it. But, like, my thought is that I like, more accessible magic. I think it's a good way to view magic. I also like the bad guys. Like, once the Christine's dad is dead, which he's very clearly a bad guy at the beginning of this, right? There's like the police guys, though they're very clearly bad guys, right? But I like how Christine as a character, not really sure where she fits into this. Do you know what I'm saying? Not sure if she's good, not sure if she's bad. I have no idea. I know she's pursuing her own things. You know, I like the idea of those characters you have that can kind of, they're a little good and a little bad and a lot selfish. Also, the flesh melting off after the potions was tremendous.
Oh, it was wonderful. Yeah, molting.
Yeah.
The human molting is very well done.
And I thought, that's amazing. And I think that in terms of the way to look at magic and the effects when they wear off, I think it's a cool way to see that and to maybe look at it differently in terms of whatever magical effect you have when it wears off. What does that look like? Not just like it's a light switch, click, oh, it's been 3 rounds, it's off now. You know, there's this metamorphosis process of the magic wearing off, right? And what does that look like?
Do you see so the concept of touchstones in this show? So there are definite moments where the action drops and you get that sort of drama between people and that human connection. So you see it like when Letty is reaching out to Ruby. And I think you even see it on a certain level when Christine is reaching out to Ruby, right? And, you know, Tick and George and... so you have
even
all
his
of
dad,
this
but
interconnectedness, and I think maybe that doesn't start as one for him, but
no, but I think it very close,
you know,
because once George is dead, he doesn't have another connection to any family,
So I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to mention there, but I think it's a good example of where you can see where that comes in within all the chaos.
I agree, and drives as well. There's a good example of why is it that these few characters are going towards the danger instead of away from it. Now, maybe initially it's because, well, we're stuck in this terrible situation, right? But then there's this constant thing pushing them. Why am I not just giving up and laying down and dying? Why do I continue to fight? Why do I continue to go into danger? So I think you're right. There's lots of great examples of touchstones. The only thing I will say to touch on with those is that generally speaking, the touchstones in game are supposed to be like NPCs and that kind of stuff. And I think in this situation, it looks like they would be more touchstones PC to PC. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, not necessarily, because I can't think of Atticus's dad's name in the show, the character's name.
But
the guy who he is reaching out to and has a relationship with, and then ends up kind of actually opening up with him. So that is a character that's not a main character that we see.
I guess when I think about when I watch this show though, and I think of who the PCs for this show are, it's Atticus, Ruby, Hippolyta, and what's her name? Letty. Those.
See, I wouldn't have guessed Hippolyta at first until the other episode.
I agree.
So then I'm like, well, and now she's got kind of her own story arc and more investigation.
Well, George would have been a PC, but he died. His character died. And then someone has to make a new character, and that's when Hippolyta steps into the limelight. So I think that in my mind, that's why I don't mention him, but I think that he's a good example of a touchstone for Tick, and So I think that's a great point though, because it's something we don't really talk about a whole lot, but it's a good way to kind of show that. And then the daughter, Tick's younger cousin, Hippolyta's daughter, I can't think of her name, but she's a good example of
Dee. Well, they call her Dee, but it's Diane or Diana. I can't remember, but
it's a good example of a way to portray a kid in a game in not such a boring MacGuffin kind of a here's the plot device hammer that you got to go use. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I appreciated that. I thought that was good.
Do you see any good examples of insanity and manifestations of vices or mental instability happening?
So, you see the alcoholism with Tick's dad. Mm-hmm. That's very clearly in there. You see a lot of his outbursts of rage, which I think you know is, whether it's condition cards or whatever system you're using. I think it's a good example of that. Same thing with Tick. He has some, you know, bursts of outrage and stuff. Lots of moments with Lottie of her running away. Letty. Of her running away in terror of things, you know, like in the basement. Well, there's things.
There's a really good scene after she dies and then comes back where she is just utterly distraught. When
they lift the veil from their eyes and they realize what happened when they're at the mansion, the Braithwaite mansion. That's a really cool, because all you hear is them screaming from the other rooms, right? That's a great moment. There's a couple good moments of realization of what is happening, you know, when they first see the Shoggoths with the police, because it's like, what's this noise in the woods? And then all of a sudden one guy gets torn in half, and you're like, what the deuce? You know?
Anything that was sort of like a revelation that you're like, oh, well, I could portray this in game differently.
So something that I realized when I was watching it is we run a lot of Trail of Cthulhu, and I realized whenever you're running a game, you're sort of running the fictionalized version, like our modern view of whatever that moment is, right? Uh-huh. But that show very much feels to me like it's in that time period, and it really made me realize I don't think the games that I'm running feel like they're in that time in the same way that show is. Mm-hmm. So I think if you really want to try and capture that post-war, you know, War II era, 1950s kind of a thing, 1940s kind of a thing, that's, you know, about the best way you're going to see it. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. In terms of both time period, the stratification of class, you know what I'm saying, and race and that kind of a thing is very clearly there.
Well, and homosexuality too.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, the way that is treated. Mm-hmm. And
so I think, but it very much feels like that time period, whereas my games, I don't think that they feel of that time in the same way. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, I'm not sure that I want them to, you know, like sometimes you just want something a little bit easier in terms of like how heavy the game content is, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's whatever you're going for. So I'm not saying that I want all of my games to feel that heavy, but I do think it's interesting to look at it and see and think, maybe there are some moments that I want to hit harder that way. Do you know what I mean? Like this is that moment in the story, and I want that to hit home more. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that would be the first thing.
I just, you know, madness and insanity is a big part of Lovecraft as well. Mm-hmm. So
I agree. Yeah, right on.
I see it a little bit starting with the way that in the show that Tick has the obsession. So it starts as sort of a curiosity, like a drive for him. Oh, and it's become dialed up to a point where you're like, ooh, this is starting to feel a little unhealthy. It's almost
pathological now.
Yeah. And I kind of like that idea of taking a character's drive and dialing it up in a way 11. That is unhealthy. Like using that as a penalty of insanity.
I agree.
I think that is a cool idea.
Mm-hmm. I think very easily be worked with condition cards, like if you're doing the Trail of Cthulhu kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a subtle change from this is what's forcing you to keep going to this is why you're not going to stop. Now you can't stop not going. Exactly. Yeah. You know, it was one thing where it's like, oh, you know, I'm curious and I want to know more, but now it's like, I need it.
Yeah, I have to know more now. Yeah. Even at my own personal risk.
Yeah, that's a common Lovecraft thread. Yeah. That curiosity turned up to 11.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess the other thing would be, like I said, the portrayal of the female lead characters, I think, is a good thing to pull from. I think that they have more, I don't know, developed motivations, I guess, however you want to say that. They're portrayed in a different way. The characters are written differently, and obviously, you know, the people that are portraying the roles do a really good job as well. So I think if you're looking for examples of stronger female characters, I think that's a good thing to pull from. Mm-hmm. I can't remember what it was.
They're all strong female characters, and they're all very different too. Yeah. You know, everything from Hippolyta to Dee to Letty to Christine, and even farther from us, that circle, when you're looking at I know we don't remember her name, the Korean Cat of Nine Tails, or Fox of Nine Tails, whatever it is, lady. But then even her best friend and her mom.
Yeah.
Like they are all.
It's really impressive that in that short amount of time in one episode, like you really get a feel for who those characters were, like her best friend and her mom are two being the example, right? And you really have a sense for who they are, in that short amount of time. I think it's a great example of how to develop characters in a short time and give them context, right? Just through some small things that they were doing or whatever, But yeah, I was trying to think of what it was when we first started Night Witches, where I was trying to find good examples of strong female characters that were outside of the normal classic tropey ones, you know what I'm saying? To sort of use to pull from. But I can't remember where, because I remember there was something and I was like, this is what I need to pull from and use because this is a good example of it, but I can't remember now. It may have been partially Babylon Berlin. But,
well, and when you look at all of those strong female characters, you're getting a broader range of emotion for their ambitions. So it's not just like, sex and manipulation, right? So you're seeing actions motivated by fear, actions motivated by guilt, sadness, and certainly some fear too. And it's just a broader spectrum than what you see a lot of times, which is nice, especially in the pulpy kind of sci-fi. A lot of times female characters tend to be just like obnoxiously flat.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that is because the time period in which they were also written. Do you know what I'm saying?
No.
And it's kind of unfortunate, but just sort of is what it is. But obviously, time goes by and we get better stories. Just they have more to draw from. So anything else about Lovecraft Country, or should we?
I don't know. I feel like maybe there should be more about the magic, but I just not really thinking of anything right now.
Well, I think magic is sort of a gimme because it's so much in the Lovecraft mythos.
Things that we can take from that for game perspective. I don't know. Maybe this one is just like maybe allowing your players to dabble a little bit.
Well, I think it's a good example of other ways to describe the way things happen and the way they work is the big thing. Like to watch it and try and find the language to describe what is happening. Big yawn, my goodness. So, alrighty. Well, so highly recommended. Yes, no.
Yeah,
I think
it's an awesome show.
I agree. It's one of my probably top 5, top 10 shows. Kind of. That's a moving list all the time. But I think it's an interesting way because to portray Lovecraft in sort of, I don't know. So when I would recommend like Lovecraft stuff, I'm thinking like True Detective is a good one to go to, right? But this has such a different feel from True Detective, but it's still so much very Lovecraft. Like I really like the contrast of those two side by side. Like in one sense, this is a very much a timepiece. It's like set in this moment in history, and still has all the sinister Lovecraft happening, but still has this drastically different vibe and feel to it. It doesn't feel as dirty and grimy as True Detective does.
And True Detective doesn't feel like the cosmic horror in the same way. You get horror, you get investigation, you get some of the weirdness and the cultiness, but you don't get that otherworldly cosmic.
I'll agree.
That almost like 100%. Sci-fi.
I agree.
Dollop.
But the thing is that it's because I feel like throughout that series, which we should probably just do a whole episode on True Detective season 1, because holy crap, is it amazing. But one thing that I appreciated with it is I was, up until the very end of it, I was almost never certain whether there was an actual supernatural cosmic horror piece to it or whether it was just fucked up people. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's something that I appreciated in that example. Is like you could make the argument either way that there are supernatural and cosmic elements to this or not. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying. So right on. All right, well, so Lovecraft Country, awesome. We highly recommend it by us. So check it out if you have HBO or HBO Go or whatever. It's a really, really cool series. 10 episodes. Hopefully there'll be a second season. I can't imagine there won't be. And we'll be looking forward to checking that out. So definitely go check it out. A lot of fun, good time, lots of inspiration. So as you know, remember the Gonna Geek Network. So you can head over to GonnaGeekNetwork.com and check out all the awesome podcasts and geeky content over there. And if you like what we do here at Just More Fix, you can head over to Patreon.com/JustMoreFix and support us over there to get access to all of our raw audio feeds and pre-shows as well, and early access to all of our content, as well as our zine in PDF or print format, depending on what level you support at. And join the awesome ranks of our other Patreon supporters like Timothy Barra, Alistair H., Tiziana Furlano, Hector Trelane, Paul Hubbard, Alan White, and the OG Todd Olson. I think that'll do it for this week, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can support us at patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix or follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.